All right, so we were joined by my friend Carl Lampton, currently with the Mississippi Attorney General's Office, Department of Medicare Fraud. I'm sorry, Medicaid Fraud. Former officer in the Capitol Police Department, and also former officer in West Point. He's
Yes,
got
sir.
more years in law enforcement than any of these kids have been alive. I've got a here with me at Velma Jackson High School. We're talking about the Law and Public Safety Career Cluster, and we are recording this for our friends at Rosa Scott, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, and the Academic Options Center, as well as our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for taking some time for us today. And again, so many years on law enforcement, and we got to, just want to let these kids know what all goes on in the life of a police officer, and I know you've got a lot of experience in that. So take us back to your time in the Golden Triangle when you first got into this, and how you got into this, and some of the things that you've done.
Okay, I have been in law enforcement since, in one shape, form, or fashion or another, since 1996. I was working full time for Sarah Lee, and one of my coworkers was on auxiliary in West Point, and he was telling me he would come in on Mondays and Tuesdays and tell me about all the exciting things that they did on the weekends. So it got to pique my interest because I'm an adrenaline junkie. So I got on the auxiliary in West Point in February of 96, and I stayed with them till 2000, the year 2000, when I went full time. Worked the street for about 8 years, rose to the rank of sergeant while I was on the street or patrolling, answering what you all would see as the marked patrol unit and the uniform. And when you call 911 and have a problem, the officer that showed up, that's what I did for about full time for about 8 years. Then I got into investigations, went to accident reconstruction school. Then I became a narcotics investigator and just a general investigator, where I set up drug deals and would seek confidential informants, ran search warrants, and kicked in doors and testified in court and put people in jail. But my crowning jewel, I think, the one that I really enjoyed the most, was I had a child neglect abuse case that I worked when the child presented at the hospital at 28 days old with 6 fractured ribs and a failure to thrive. And we worked that case for about 5 years. And when we finally went to court, he was about 5 years old, and we ended up terminating the rights of the parent, and he was able to be adopted by his foster mother. And that was my crowning jewel, because the reason I got in law enforcement was the adrenaline, but I stayed because you find so many people that can't speak for themselves, and you have a sense of service. And I just wanted to be able to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. So that's why I got into law enforcement. I got married, moved here to Jackson, took some time away from law enforcement, but those will tell you that once you get into law enforcement, you kind of get bit by the bug. And I got back into it with Capitol Police. And then I had an opportunity to come over here to the Attorney General's office and work in Medicaid fraud. And what I do in Medicaid fraud now is, our responsibility is anyone that's a Medicaid recipient or any licensed facility. And what people don't understand is, when you get admitted to the hospital, or when you go to the dentist, or when you go anywhere and you get under sedation, or you get under the care of someone else, you become what's called a vulnerable person. Yep. And then what happens is, we're responsible. So say, for instance, you go to the doctor and something happens to you, whether it be malpractice or intentional or anything like that, then we have a purview where we come in and we investigate and we prosecute, if necessary, the responsible parties, to make sure that everyone stays safe, especially when they're a vulnerable adult. And that's what I do right now.
Awesome. And I think that's a good picture of all the spectrums of law enforcement, because when you were with Capitol Police, you were protecting state buildings.
Yes, I kind of brushed over that, but when I worked for State Capitol Police, we at that time we were responsible for all buildings owned and leased by the state of Mississippi. My main responsibility was the 2 Mississippi museums. That area was my responsibility. The museum, Old Capitol Complex, Old Capitol Museum, the War Memorial, and the Capers Building, which is an old archives building, and William Winter Building, which is the new archives building. And that was my main responsibility. But Capitol Police, their responsibilities had changed since July 1 of 2020, and they're slowly transitioning to a full service police department to where they will, if you live in certain areas, when you call 911, they will be the ones to respond and answer your call for service.
Yeah, and I think that's important to realize is that police work is not just what you see on TV and the movies. You know, all that stuff's cool, and and if you want to do the car chases, obviously you can do all that. If you want to, do like you see on Cops or in Bad Boys and all that stuff, obviously that is a part of it. But there's a lot more skills involved when it comes to law enforcement because it's like you have to be able to investigate. You have to be able to find the right questions. You have to be able to deal with people. And I love the way that you described it one time. You have to be able to deal with people when they're at their worst. So
yes.
Even if they are a great person, you are seeing them at their lowest point in life. So what are some of the skills that are necessary, in your opinion, to be a good police officer?
Problem solving, being compassionate, being able to think on your feet, and being able to retain a lot of knowledge. But the main thing is being empathetic. I think a lot of people don't understand that as the role of police officer, you do see people at their bad day. Either they are a victim or they've done something wrong. So they're not real happy and they're distraught, they're upset. So you have to be counselor, you have to be you can't, you just can't come in like a bull in a china shop and slap the cuffs on everybody, but you really have to ask questions to see what happened and try to determine where you go from there. But I think the biggest thing is being able to communicate. Your communication skills, you have to be able to talk, you have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to process the things that people are telling you and also the things that they're not telling you, because a lot of people's communication is nonverbal. It's their body language, it's the rolling of their eyes, it's their facial expressions, and you have to be able to read them to actually find out, because they'll tell you nothing is wrong, but if they're, you can see it in their face something is wrong. You kind of have to pry a little bit to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, and on top of that, on top of being able to talk, you got to be able to write, and you got to be able to speak in court. Because
yes,
there's a problem in a police report, somebody that committed a crime could get off.
Yes, that's true.
Take on the witness stand, somebody could get off.
That is a skill, and believe it or not, when I was in, I think, the 10th grade, I wanted to take Spanish as an elective, but my father made me take typing because he said if you're going to school, you need to learn how to type. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I use typing every day. It makes, if you're more efficient if you know how to type and understand the keyboard. You're able to finish your reports a lot faster, a lot more efficient. And writing is very important because you have to be able to get your point across. Sometimes, and I do it also, we get a little lazy in our texts, and you'll find some of the younger officers, they do their reports like their texts. And sometimes people write like they speak, and that's not necessarily proper English. And then when you go to court, you have to be able to articulate, you have to be able to enunciate, and be able to be calm on the stand, because if they can, a lot of times the defense attorneys will tell you, if you can't attack the case, you attack the officer. And if they can get you rattled on the stand and make it seem like you're unprofessional, then it calls into question everything that you've done in that investigation. You could have done everything right, crossed all your T's, dotted all your I's, got all the evidence wrapped up in a little bow. But if you fall apart on the stand and can't articulate why you did this or why you did that, then it comes into question your judgment and your character, and then the case goes out the door.
Yeah, and I think that'd be in any profession. And I've just seen it, just the whole generation. They want to talk like they text and write like they text, but it's so important, especially when people's property and livelihoods and money is at stake, to make sure that is being done correctly in a law enforcement in any agency. Now, one thing across a lot of these fields is we need young people to get into this. And we just watched a video where You know, it really is. If you're wanting to do something where it's not the same thing every day, if you're a sports person and you like the competition and the athletic aspect, that could be a big draw for you. But it's like you said before, you need people to get into this that reflect the community. So if you've only got one demographic that's becoming a police officer, it becomes a problem in the community. So why do these young people need to consider getting into this, especially if they, you know, maybe I don't want to do the whole college thing. Why should they consider law enforcement?
Well, I got into law enforcement later on in life. I was about 26 when I really got exposed to law enforcement, but it's a good career. It's, you know, the thing about it is once you get your certification, your basic certification, it's like having a college degree. You get a little experience and you're able to move up to and do different things. And that's the thing. I've been doing this well over 20 years and no 2 days are ever the same. If you like people, you want to work in the public, it's a good, steady job. Now, the pay is that's something that one time they didn't really, the pay was not as where it should be. Excuse me, but slowly but surely, departments and cities are understanding that if we want good quality people, excuse me, we want good quality people, you have to pay. That's the thing. The thing about it is there's some departments that pay very, very well. And I would suggest if you're looking for a career in law enforcement and you don't want to go to school first, then I would suggest going in the military. You can go in the reserves or you can go do a 2 or 4 year stint. And because that helps, one, it gives you a good history of work. It gets you in shape. Because one aspect of the police academy is being able to run, do push-ups and be physical. Because unfortunately, sometimes you can't talk your way out of a situation and you do have to, what we call lay hands on people. And you're going to have to be willing to put your hands on folks and physically put them under arrest. And sometimes that's unfortunate. And a lot of times you can talk your way into getting someone to comply, but sometimes you run up on situations where they just will not comply. So you have to be in shape. So college junior college is good. Going to the military is good. But you don't necessarily have to have a degree to start, but if you want to progress education as you get into the executive level, as far as chiefs and captains and lieutenants, then they do require some form of education. And the thing about it is it makes you more well-versed, makes you more well-rounded, and it gives you an idea, and it helps you be able to articulate more, write better, and gives you some resources that you wouldn't necessarily have if you didn't go to school. And why I would suggest getting into law enforcement is people complain about law enforcement, especially in the African-American communities, but everybody can complain, but my suggestion and my mantra is I'm not going to complain. I'm going to be part of the solution. You can be a part of the solution if you know you're a good person and you know that that you can do a good job at this and you want to serve your community. Then why not be a police officer in your community or in a community near you? Because we need more young people to get involved, and we need more minorities. We need more females to get involved, because females have a different aspect, because men are just naturally stronger and bigger than women. Women can think faster on their feet, and they can always, sometimes a woman can talk her way out of a situation where a man wants to use brute force, but sometimes it takes a gentle word to get what you need to get done. So there's everything. All you really see sometimes is just the marked patrol unit, but there are so many aspects to law enforcement that you can get involved in. And there's the local municipality, there's the county, which is the sheriff's department, and then there are state agencies. There's the Attorney General's office, there's Mississippi Highway Patrol, there's Department of Public Safety, which is Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. Wildlife and Fisheries, Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections. There's all different avenues of law enforcement that you can be involved in. You just don't have to, put on the uniform and drive the marked unit. A lot of us start that way, start there, but then we branch out and do other things. But it's a vast career. You can go, you get into their career, and even if you don't stay in Mississippi, but I do encourage you to stay at home. There's other opportunities. I was just driving down I-55 this weekend, and Gwinnett County, which is in metropolitan Atlanta, has got a billboard up that they're hiring. Everybody's hiring law enforcement, and they're understanding that to get the good quality candidates, you have to pay well. And it's a good career, good retirement. You'll be able to do 25 years and retire, then go do something else.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because once there's also a great opportunity for part-time security work.
Yes,
hospitals are always looking for security people, private events that you can do when you get off and make pretty good part-time money as well.
Yeah, there's always somebody looking for a law enforcement officer to provide security. You go by the car lots on 55, you see blue lights flashing. That's an off-duty police officer making some extra money. In his marked unit, because a lot of cities, they allow their officers to use their equipment, their marked unit, to do private security. They just have to get permission. But there's lots of opportunities for you to make money. You can also, this is a selfless plug, you can also referee.
That's a whole different rabbit hole.
Whole different ball of wax.
But you made a good point about, you needing women. We had a nurse last week that talked about the need for men, because of when the public is dealing with somebody, sometimes people are more comfortable talking to a different gender. A woman that's been a victim of a violent crime, especially if it's a sexual assault, might be more comfortable talking to a female police officer.
Yes.
If they're not comfortable saying what happened, a bad person could get away and have another victim. So having very diverse police staff is vital to the safety of the community.
Yes, and that's the thing. A diverse police staff is more effective. I've had several occasions where I've had female victims that I already knew going in that I needed a female officer. So just a couple of weeks ago, I had a case I was working, and I got one of my coworkers to say, I said, "Hey, I need you to ride up here with me because I need to talk to my victim. I need a softer edge." Because we had to press her for some information, but I needed a softer person to be able to press her to get the information I needed. So she went with me, and we were able to get the information that we needed.
Yeah, and that's just, I think it's important. On TV you see, it's always the big macho muscle guys doing the shoot 'em up car chasing, but the fact is we really need good young ladies to be involved in this, of every race. So it's really important for females to consider getting into this, because like you said, they have the softer edge, they can move up into supervisory roles.
And as far as diversity, when you have a community, the biggest thing in the news today is African American communities. But in larger cities, you have groups that are non-African American but non-Native American people, as far as not being born here. They transitioned, they've immigrated here. And what happens is when you have crime, and what happens is, especially in up on your end, we've had some crimes with people of Hispanic origin being robbed and killed because they're a very close-knit community, and they don't trust very well. So people prey upon them because they know the communication barriers, cultural barriers. But if we had, in that situation, if you have more Hispanic officers, they can go in and they're already Spanish speaking, so they can communicate, for one, and then two, they understand the culture. So the more diverse your department is, the more, because my feeling on the matter is you need to have representation of every nationality that you serve. Needs to be a representation on your police department. So if you have an Hispanic population, you need to have Hispanic officers. You have an African American population, you need to have African American officers. You're going to have female population, so you need female officers. You're going to have male population, you're going to have male officers. So that makes your department itself more effective. And if you have that, then you have cultural tolerance, and then you don't necessarily have, you can avoid some of the issues that we've had in the paper, because a lot of times you have what's called bias-based profiling. And that is, and sometimes people do it, sometimes it's bias, and sometimes it's a known bias, and sometimes it's an unknown bias. And when you have people doing known biases, that's where you have the problem. But if you have somebody with an unknown bias, because that's just how they were raised and that's how their culture does things, because some families, they yell, and when they argue, they're yelling at each other. And some communities, some families, they don't yell. They talk with level voices. So if you get an officer that comes from a background where they're very animated and they're very loud, they go to a call and the people are quiet and they're using their normal voice. They're very animated, they're very loud. That will make them uncomfortable. That will make them shut down. So it works both ways. And the more diverse you have, then it comes to, if I want to know more about the Hispanic culture, then if there's an Hispanic officer that I can go to and talk to and get to know and say, hey man, I got some questions. What about this? What about that? What about this? And they will be more than happy to tell you about their culture, because people are proud of their culture. They're proud of their heritage. And the more that we can share, the more we can have a better understanding.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I know in Canton and in Jackson and even in Ridgeland, there's been some Mexican Americans preyed on because of the language barrier. So we'll have
that's the biggest thing, language barrier.
Later. And if English is not your first language and you speak Spanish and you're kind of on the fence, I'm telling you, these law enforcement departments really need you, because you're just so vital to the safety of not only the public, but to the officers as well.
Yes.
All right, but I do have some good questions from the students.
Sure.
These are all ninth graders. This first one is a great one, and you did talk briefly about this. This is Donovan Smith. And he said, as a law enforcement officer, what is the key to keeping yourself calm in a stressful situation?
First of all, understanding that you're going into a high stress situation, and people are gonna, and we all know people sometimes say things when they're angry that they don't mean. The key with that is understanding that they're in a stressful situation and it's not personal. And just be calm. And you have to have what we say in law enforcement, you have to have thick skin. You have to be able to take a little bit, not saying you got to take a lot of verbal abuse, because you can be upset, and it's just how you kind of talk to them. If they're using verbal abuse, what I normally do is, if they're yelling, I talk quieter. Why are you yelling at me? I'm standing right here. I know you're upset, but yelling at me is not going to fix it. I'm here to help you. I didn't do it. And it's just using those type of skills, and mainly is understanding that this is a high stress situation. It's nothing personal. You've got a job to do and they're upset. And if you get upset and they're upset, then you won't get anything accomplished.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to being able to speak. So I think that's just so vital in every field, but especially when you're dealing with a stressful situation that could potentially be dangerous.
Yes.
Now this is Jemiah Carson, and she asked, how do you handle staying with a case that takes years to solve?
Determination and perseverance. Just like I said, the case I had earlier with the young man, I was bound and determined to make sure he had a safe environment to grow up in. Because like I said, when I got to the hospital, he was 28 days old. He couldn't speak, he couldn't talk, he couldn't do anything for himself. So it was up to us to be able to be his advocate, to be able to speak for him and make sure he had a safe environment to grow up in. And I want to say he should be. This is 2022. So this happened back in 8 or 9. So he's probably 13 years old right now, 13, 14 years old. So I'm sure he's doing, and I've had some other victims that the case is kind of dragged out, but they're doing very, very well. You just have to stick with it. Just like what I do now, these cases take a long time, because a lot of what I do now is I use my brain more than I use my brawn. As I would say, you got to think and process the case. I got a couple cases I've been working on for a year right now, because you get some information and that leads you to get more information. You just have to send off that information. And it's just a matter of keep getting information in to be able to prove what we're trying to prove. And we're not always trying to put someone trying to prove someone did anything wrong. We're really just trying to get to the truth, because I've got two cases that when you first look at it, you're like, oh man, they did something wrong. But the more you dig into it, you're realizing that one is a clerical error, and two, the laws have changed to allow them to be able to do that now. So, you just have to stick with it. And the thing about it is you have to go in with an open mind and know and say, hey, I'm going to see this through to the end.
Yeah. This is a great question. This is Aiden Owens, and he asked, what was your biggest misconception that changed about law enforcement once you got involved in it?
That everything is black and white. When I say everything is black and white, when I got into law enforcement, I thought that as long as I was enforcing the laws, I was going to be able to do my job. But you have a thing called politics when you do law enforcement, because you've given someone a lot of power to be able to arrest people and put people in jail and take away their freedom. And some people, whether they're white or black, they don't necessarily feel that the law applies to them. So you have sometimes where you have to understand the political, the aspect. I give you an example. When I was on the road, I wrote a lot of traffic tickets, but I made it a conscious effort to make sure the tickets that I wrote reflected the demographic of the community. Because what happened is I stopped some individuals, a young man and his father complained, because what he started doing is he started kind of stalking me. It was one particular morning I had stopped a little old lady. She was speeding, and I don't know if I gave her a ticket or not, but he was talking to my chief. He's stopping this little old lady right now. He said, and so he pulled me in, and I said, Chief. And so what I did was I brought all my tickets in because we could print them out, and it would print out the demographic. And my demographic showed that it was equal between men and women. It was equal between Caucasian and African American. And then I even had some Hispanic and Oriental in there also. But I purposely made sure that I treated everybody fairly. So sometimes, even though somebody was guilty of speeding, I would let them go, because I want to make sure that I took it upon myself to make sure that I enforce the laws properly.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to this next question. This is Kaylee Luckett, and she asked, how would law enforcement be different if everyone approached the job the way you do?
I think we wouldn't have incidences like the Ferguson, George Floyd. If people were more empathetic to people that don't look like them, and they took more time to get to know other cultures, I think the miscommunication in the cultures, I think that it's a distrust. And I think if they did it like I did it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I made mistakes, but as over the years, I have gotten it to the point where I understand the big picture, and I understand how to deal with people in such a way that you can still do your job, but you don't have to treat people what they feel they're being unfairly treated. Because I would tell all young officers that you don't have to be mean to people to take them to jail. You don't have to be mean to people to enforce the laws. You can be laughing. I have been cracking jokes and laughing with them all the way while they're still going to jail. They're still going to jail because honestly, we're all one mistake from being, I would tell them, we're in the front seat of this car right now, but we're all one mistake from being in the back seat of this car, and everybody makes mistakes. But the key is learning from them. And the extra thing to that is, if your parents or somebody older than you can give you a lesson that you didn't have to learn on your own, you didn't have to buy, as the older people say, if they're willing to give you a lesson, then a bought lesson, take that lesson. Because, even though society, the culture has changed and social media has brought different things, everything is basically the same as it was, other than technology, when your parents were your age, your grandparents were your age. And so, people are people. And if you treat people right, then things will be a whole lot better.
All right, I just
Go
got
ahead.
one from the students. This is London Light, and she asked, "Is it stressful knowing that your job is dangerous on a day-to-day basis?"
Well, the job that I currently have right now is not real stressful. The only thing that's really stressful about my job right now is meeting deadlines. But the average officer, the day-to-day patrol officer, yes, it's very stressful. But to keep the stress down, you have to have stress relievers. A lot of them run, work out. My first assistant chief told me that this job cannot consume me. He told me, he said, you got to find hobbies outside this job that you can do to take away stress. He said, because when you take off that gun belt and you hang it up at night, you leave it till the next day. And so he said, you got to find other things to as stress relievers and find hobbies. That's when I got into refereeing and got into coaching, Pee Wee and stuff like that, because that was my avenue. It was a twofold thing with me. It was a stress reliever. I enjoyed being around children and kids, and it got me because I was a transplant. So I had to get to know my community, and my community had to get to know me. So the young men that I coached, when they're small, they're all 25 and 26 years old. And I was just talking to my oldest son just the other day, and one of his old teammates from basketball and football, they were talking about me, and he was like, "Pop, he still thinks highly of you, and he's always asking about you." So you can have a very good effect on young people because, and that takes away that helps take away the stress to know, hey, I'm doing a good job. Because if you're out here grinding every day and you don't think you make a difference, that increases your stress level, because the job is stressful enough because it's dangerous. But if you're grinding at this job every day and you're like, why am I doing this job when I'm not making a difference? But believe me, you're making a difference. If you just continue to do the job and make the difference, it takes that stress level all the way down.
Absolutely. All right, now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so
Sure.
much for making time for us. But before we go, I know you are adamant in speaking about with the anti-police media that goes around. But at the end of the day, you always want to let these young people know about how they need to interact if there is ever a situation involving law enforcement.
Yes, and thank you for that. As your ninth graders, you're going to be getting your driver's license soon, and sometimes you're going to be in a car that when you're not with your parents. The key is to go home. Okay, your parents send you out in the world, and they want you to come back to them safe. The main thing is compliance. If you're in the car, you're driving, or somebody's driving, whether you think you're guilty or not, whether if they say you're speeding, whether you were speeding or not, it's you comply. You keep your hands where they can see them. If you're not driving, you keep your mouth closed, because all that does is heighten the stress level of the officer. We ain't did this, we ain't did that, and we ain't got to do this, we ain't got to do that. That battle is not yours to fight as young people. That battle is for your parents to fight. And I tell my sons this all the time. It's yes, sir, no, sir. You tell them where your driver's license is, sir. My driver's license is in the glove compartment. Is it okay to reach for it right now? And it's not about being weak. It's not about being submissive. It's about doing what you need to do to survive. Because it's just a ticket. It's just an accusation that you were speeding. It's just and they may say, hey, I smell weed in the car. If you ain't got weed in the car, what's the sense of you getting upset? Don't get upset about it. If you know you've done nothing wrong, stay calm. Just stay calm, because the more you get agitated, the more that officer is going to get agitated. And then that's going to make the situation a whole lot worse, because the ultimate goal is if you go out with your friends, your parents' ultimate goal is to let you go out and have a good time. But your parents' ultimate goal is for you to come home safe. And that's what I suggest. The thing about it is, be smart, stay safe, and get home to your parents. And you can always live to fight another day. If they've done something wrong, then let your parents fight that battle for you. Let that man, that's their job as your parents, is to fight your battles with other adults. It's not for you to take up that battle, that fight, especially on the side of a road. Most officers are not going to argue with you on this. They'll tell you, this is not a place to hold court on the side of the road. So take the ticket, let your parents fight it out in court for you. But the main thing is come home safe.
And in addition to your parents, there's plenty of people in the community that are willing to help.
Yes.
Yeah, like you said, on the and that goes for anybody. You know, the side of the road is not the place. It's not the place to show your tail. You know.
Yes, it is not.
If you didn't do it, you know, let them think you did it, and then just like you said, because I had a situation myself. He pulled over the wrong vehicle. It wasn't even close. I mean, I could have sat there and argued with him. I took the ticket, went to the judge, all thrown out. So
Yeah.
you know, it really is. It's not the place to argue. But again, Carl Lampton, Mississippi Attorney General's office. Thank you so much for joining us. Really good stuff, and thanks for your passion in law enforcement, and always thanks for your service to our community.
No problem, brother. Anytime you need me, you just let me know.
All right, I'll see you soon, my friend.
Take care now.
See you.